Hours before the heir, Ram, is crowned, Ayodhya projects absolute stability. Public support is unified. The monarch's authority is unquestioned. Yet, by sunrise the next day, this entire power structure collapses. There is no external military invasion. There is no economic crisis or peasant revolt. The system dismantles itself from the inside. The architect of this collapse is Manthara. She holds zero formal political power. She commands no military units and possesses no personal wealth. She is a peripheral maid in the royal household. This schematic maps the structural vulnerability of Ayodhya. A peripheral node, Manthara, bypasses the entire defense apparatus. She targets a single mid-level node, Queen Kaikeyi, and successfully injects a malicious logic into the executive process, causing it to fracture. Ayodhya's collapse serves as a clinical case study in asymmetric political subversion. True systemic threats bypass rival armies entirely, originating instead from internal nodes capable of rewriting reality for those in power. To execute this subversion, Manthara requires access. As Kaikeyi's lifelong attendant, she has it. Before Manthara's intervention, Kaikeyi's loyalty is intact. She actively celebrates Ram's impending ascension, viewing it as a victory for the entire royal family. To turn a loyalist into an insurgent, the manipulator must execute a targeted replacement of the stakeholder's foundational reality. Kaikeyi's positive perception of the state must be deleted and replaced with a threat. This is the mechanism of manufactured insecurity. It is the deliberate process of convincing an individual who is objectively safe that their current environment actually poses an existential threat to their survival. We can trace the exact psychological protocol Manthara uses to achieve this. It requires poisoning Kaikeyi's institutional loyalty, isolating her from counterintelligence, and weaponizing the state's own laws. Subversion at this level is not an act of physical force. It is an act of translation. It requires taking a positive-sum environment and meticulously translating it into a zero-sum conflict inside the target's mind. Phase 1 begins with a jarring disruption. Manthara interrupts Kaikeyi's preparation for the coronation, projecting intense grief and warning of impending doom, immediately establishing cognitive dissonance. This table outlines competing psychological models. Column A is Kaikeyi's baseline reality. Ram's coronation creates a positive-sum loop of shared prosperity. Manthara counters with column B, the injected reality, a strict zero-sum equation, where one party's gain requires an equal loss for another. Manthara argues that Ram's ascension is not a victory for the state, but a localized, absolute victory for his biological mother, Queen Kaushalya. She then weaponizes Kaikeyi's own history. Kaikeyi has long been King Dasharatha's favorite wife and a battlefield companion. Manthara insists that the moment the new regime takes power, Kaushalya will aggressively dismantle this elevated status, reducing Kaikeyi to the rank of a servant. The first step of manipulation relies on breaking the target's sense of safety. By tying Kaushalya's success directly to Kaikeyi's degradation, Manthara forces Kaikeyi to view the upcoming coronation as an act of hostility. Kaikeyi initially resists this framing. She trusts Ram. To override this trust, Manthara needs to provide tangible evidence of a conspiracy against Kaikeyi's biological son, Bharata. Manthara does not invent a lie. She selects a verifiable fact. The sole data point she relies on is that Bharata is currently out of the capital, visiting his maternal grandparents in the Kaikeyi kingdom. This timeline tracks that data point. Initially, Kaikeyi views Bharata's accidents through Branch 1, standard royal procedure. Manthara forces the data through Branch 2, recontextualizing the absence as a calculated political maneuver by the king to clear Ram's path to power. This recontextualization forces Kaikeyi to look backward. Routine palace logistics, family visits, and past kindnesses are recoded as hostile deception. Effective paranoia requires verifiable facts to anchor the delusion. The manipulation lies entirely in altering the motive assigned to those facts. Once Kaikeyi's paranoia is fully activated, Manthara shifts tactics. She moves from psychological conditioning to providing an actionable, tactical strike. She instructs Kaikeyi to cash in 2 historical boons, unconditional favors owed to her by King Dasharatha. Years prior, Kaikeyi had saved the king's life on a battlefield, repairing his shattered chariot mid-combat. The king promised her 2 wishes, which she had kept in reserve. Manthara specifies the exact demands. First, the immediate coronation of Bharata. Second, the exile of Rama to the Dandaka forest for exactly 14 years. This graph illustrates the 14-year demand as a precise strategy to prevent civil war. Immediate execution would trigger rebellion, but exile slowly decays Rama's influence over time. Simultaneously, this timeline buys Bharata enough runway to embed loyalists and secure absolute control over Ayodhya. The decree of exile is a mathematical calculation of power consolidation. It relies on the assumption that time will erode the public loyalty that sheer force could not break. With the demands formulated, Manthara issues her final instruction. Kaikeyi must retreat to the Kope Bhavan, a royal chamber of anger. She must discard her jewelry, sit on the bare floor, and refuse to speak until the king arrives. This network diagram illustrates the psychological purpose of the Kope Bhavan. By physically isolating herself, the protocol cuts Kaikeyi off from any counter-arguments, rational mediation, or reality checks. Her only remaining data input is Manthara's paranoia. Furthermore, this physical posturing forces the supreme authority of the state to abandon his position of power. Dasharatha does not summon his wife to the throne room. He is compelled to enter her territory. When the king enters the darkened chamber, the dynamic shifts. Confronted by his disheveled queen, Dasharatha is instantly pushed into a reactive and defensive posture. Desperate to appease her, Dasharatha blindly reaffirms his commitment to his ancient oath before he even hears the terms. He walks directly into the trap. Isolating the asset is the final, crucial step in subversion. It ensures the manipulated host delivers the payload to the target before the broader system has any opportunity to detect or neutralize the infection. Kaikeyi delivers the demands. In that moment, Dasharatha realizes he is trapped by the Raghukul Niyam, the ancestral law that a monarch of his lineage must honor their word, even at the cost of their life. Returning to our systems map, we see why the supreme leader cannot simply refuse. Dasharatha possesses the military and political power to ignore the plot, but the overarching constraint, the oath, prevents it. Forced to process an input pitting personal love against institutional duty, the node shatters under the contradiction. The system crashes immediately. Dasharatha collapses, incapable of bridging the gap between his reality and the legal parameters he is bound to uphold. The paradox of this vulnerability is clear. The state's defining virtue, the absolute integrity of its leader's word, was the exact exploit used to destroy it. Institutional rigidity always creates blind spots. A system that cannot process exceptions, no matter how noble its foundational rules, will eventually be hacked by those who know how to input a forced error. The forced error triggers a catastrophic chain reaction. To protect his father's oath, Rama accepts the 14-year exile. Within days, King Dasharatha dies of shock and grief. Yet Manthara's calculus ultimately fails. When Bharata returns, he immediately recognizes the subversion and refuses the usurped throne. Instead, he places Rama's wooden sandals on the seat of power, choosing to live as an ascetic outside the city. The result is a total societal collapse. Ayodhya is left with a fractured populace, a dead king, an exiled heir, and a reluctant regent. Manthara provided the logical framework for the coup, but a framework alone cannot execute a strike. The poison required a willing host. Kaikeyi had to choose to drink it and act upon it for the subversion to materialize. Ayodhya's collapse illustrates a specific vulnerability in power structures. Dismantling an established authority relies on information asymmetry, isolation, and the patient, calculated manufacturing of paranoia.
Don't forget to subscribe.